It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood.
Good morning, everyone. We have a new classmate. Her name is Priya from India.
She's from where?
I don't know. I've never heard of it.
Okay, so let's work in pairs again. Who needs a partner and can team up with Priya?
Hey, Sophia! We're a team, right?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. So, for the first page, I'm thinking we can do this and then that.
This is taken.
So, what did Jesus teach us to do? To be a real neighbor like the Samaritan. Sophia.
He taught us to show love and kindness when somebody needs help.
Priya! Over here! Hi, I'm Sophia.
How you doing, guys? It was about 30 years ago I moved to this town. I moved here cold, didn't know a soul. So when I first moved here, I pretty much spent a lot of time alone. I used to like to walk a lot, so I'd walk along the railroad tracks. They were very secluded at the time. Every so often I'd be walking the tracks and I would see somebody coming down the opposite way. And it was one guy just walked by, never said a word, but we just nodded at each other and kept on going. This happened a number of times. Well, there was one time I had moved, several years later, I had moved to the other side of town, found this nice house, and was in this neighborhood for many, many years. Well, every so often on the weekend, I would hear bluegrass coming from the house next door. Now, I couldn't see what was going on because there was a hedge along the property line at the time. But every so often, I would hear this bluegrass. Now, this wasn't recorded. This was actually live. One night, I was just curious as to what was going on. So I got out of my house, walked around the house, and went to the gate. And it was this guy I had seen on the railroad tracks. It was his house. And he had a few of his friends over, and they had all kinds of instruments, and they're just playing along, having a good old time. The whole family's sitting out. Well, they saw me and invited me in. And we started jibber-jabbering back and forth. And over the years, I got to know them pretty well, and as well as the other neighbors that I'd gotten to know. You know, it's funny, when I started studying in 2006, we all know how when you're studying, your Bible stalkers, your Bible instructors will basically feel you out. So immediately they had a target onto my neighbors next door. Obviously, we know how the scenario is. They try and get you to cut ties with the people you know on the outside, but that, and at this point, was totally out of the question. Before I started studying with JWs, I think it was in 2004, we had a rash of hurricanes in the area. As a matter of fact, two of them hit the area back to back within weeks of each other, and this town looked like a war zone for the next year. Well, after the hurricane hit, and I don't remember which one it was, we were without power for weeks, but they had a generator next door, and that's all you could hear at night were the generators. It's funny how 4 a.m. hits. Now, you kind of get used to the noise of the generators around the neighborhood, so you have no problem sleeping. What woke me up is when they ran out of gas at about 4 a.m. and the generators would cut off, and you're like, what happened? Well, it was next morning, and now I am a coffee drinker. Before anything else, I am thinking coffee. I'm not even coherent. I don't want to talk. Just coffee is on my mind. Well, I woke up, no power at all. And I had no ancient percolator to make the coffee with at that point in time. Well, there's a knock at the door. And it was my neighbor. He come over with a cup of coffee. And I'm like, oh, I'm just wondering how many people in the world will actually ever think of that. But that was so appreciated. And not that we weren't tight at that point in time, but just to consider that, bringing your neighbor a cup of coffee, meant a lot. Like I said, over the years, I went through a lot of hard times, and these people were always there for moral support. They were always there. But like I said, the first people that the JWs targeted were them. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses like to consider themselves good neighbors. But after getting to know them over the years, I was always wondering, what kind of neighbors are they really? I mean, here they were trying to get me to cut ties with people I knew outside the organization. Some of them people I had known for many years. And here they were, virtual strangers to me. Well, we're your friends now. You're only a friend and a neighbor when you're one of Jehovah's Witnesses. One thing I started noticing when I'd go over their houses was how many of them were very standoffish with their immediate neighbor. As a matter of fact, they were that way, unless they were out in service, they generally did not talk to people outside of the organization, unless they were, right now, was down for the ministry. They were actually quite cold with people outside of the organization. So I was always wondering, how do Jehovah's Witnesses consider themselves good neighbors? I mean, they're just basically horrible with people. At the beginning of this video, I played the Caleb and Sophia cartoon, which kind of stuck out. Now, Sophia's on the bus going to school. New kid gets on the bus. Obviously very shy. She's in a new neighborhood, in a new country, and she's very shy as she's walking on the bus. Did anybody notice that everybody in that video who was not a JW came across like a total animal? Which, in all honesty, is not the case, but this is the perception that Watchtower likes to paint to people outside the organization. But let's get realistic. With the JW teachings on people outside the organization, how many of Jehovah's Witnesses have told their kids, don't make friends at school, these people are going to die at Armageddon? They're basically told to stay away from the worldly kids. Now, in all honesty, in the real world, kids are kids, they just want to play. And how many of those JW kids would like nothing better than to play with those worldly kids? A kid as a JW must be a very lonely life, just from what I've heard. I can't verify that because I didn't grow up in the organization. But that was so unrealistic. If anybody noticed, the only one who offered a hand of friendship to this girl was Sophia. The rest of the kids treated her like an outcast. That in itself, I knew right from the get-go, was very unrealistic. More often than not, when a kid goes to a new school, everybody's kind of shy about the new kid. But just out of curiosity, particularly with a kid from another culture, they're going to start to filter around because they want to know about this kid from the other culture. The JW, knowing that this is a worldly kid, would not make the attempt. Jehovah's Witnesses love to use the analogy of the Good Samaritan. Now, we all know that, what happened there. The Samaritan offered assistance to somebody who was robbed, somebody who was not of his flock, and traditionally people that butted heads. But how often have you seen one of Jehovah's Witnesses go out of their way to help somebody outside the organization? It doesn't happen. They've even had magazine articles that said it. Jehovah's Witnesses help their own. And that's all they do. And that's only if you're in good standing. I can pretty well safely say today that if I was robbed and beaten and one of Jehovah's Witnesses from my congregation saw me laying there in a pool of blood, they would keep going. because I'm no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm now considered one of Jehovah's enemies. Nice perception of people. So no, Jehovah's Witnesses are not very good neighbors, unless of course they live next door to another Jehovah's Witness. And no, they have never been a good Samaritan. That's just something I wanted to point out. But when I first saw that Caleb and Sophia cartoon, I just realized how unrealistic it was. And it was very unrealistic. Anyways, guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. You guys have a good day, and I'll talk to you in a few days.